In Shoplifters, director Kore-eda Hirokazu tells the story of a very unconventional family. Husband and wife Osamu and Nobuyu are living on the edge of poverty, in occasional employment with low-wage jobs. Their son Shota happily joins Osamu when they go shoplifting together to make ends meet. Together with a young woman called Aki, they live in 2 rooms in Grandma's house, living off her pension to top up their finances. Despite their difficult financial situation, when Osamu notices a very young girl stuck outside her parents' house, hungry and cold, he decides to bring her back home to the rest of the family. And when the scale of abuse and neglect that this little girl has undergone becomes clear, they decide to secretly adopt her. Kore-eda's back catalogue, which includes Nobody Knows, Airdoll and Afterlife, already shows him as one of the most formidable talents working in directing at the moment. He's not a showy director, and yet his camera always seems to be in the right place, without that ever really feeling like a statement. For me, what defines his work is this sense of just observing life as it goes on. His camera is almost always at a remove and yet perfectly situated to understand what's happening in a scene. He's always able to imply rather than tell, so the audience has some part in the filmmaking process themselves, and he's happy to let the emotional weight of the film not be borne purely by dialogue, but instead by images, by physical motions between his actors, and by the way that he covers those moments on screen. To give you an example, early on in Shoplifters, Nobuyu is carrying Yuri, who's the little girl who they've found, back to the place where they found her, so they can return her before her parents realise she's missing, and so they don't have to take on the additional burden of having another kid in the house. As Nobuyu and Yuri, and also Osamu who's with them, near the house, you can hear screaming from her parents inside. They're just having this massive row at each other, arguing about how they never should have had a kid and how neither of them wants to look after her. We don't really get to see this, we just get a shot of the exterior of the house with its closed front door and the little toys piled in front of it, because that's where they leave Yuri every day. Osamu, who was previously convinced they should keep Yuri and now has been convinced by Nobuyu to leave her there, starts saying, look, this is the perfect time for us to leave her, we can leave her outside and they won't even notice. And Nobuyu doesn't say anything. When Osamu steps towards her to take the girl, she just sinks to her feet and she's holding Yuri in her arms. We cut straight from that to Shota, their son, waking up the next day to see that Yuri is still in the house. That's such a carefully chosen moment that completely explains the emotional journey that those characters have gone on in terms of finding this girl, and yet leaves so much up to the audience to interpret just through watching those people. Kore-eda's films work so well, I think, because they feel, on one hand, very much like created, curated, contained experiences, and yet watching them feels like watching people on the street, because their lives are so authentic and so carefully told that it often doesn't feel like a story at all. Now, because of that realism, the plot of Shoplifters can often feel quite diffuse. There's several scenes that feel like they don't have much context, they don't seem to go anywhere. There's scenes that in other movies would set up plots that would then later pay off, but here never really come back. But although these scenes first feel like they're just sort of circling around with nowhere to go, on closer inspection they in fact spiral towards a very clear conclusion. Kore-eda's plot and structure is actually pretty masterful, because what he's doing with these concurrent scenes that don't seem to have any links is comparing different types of love, really. Familial love, tenderness, and kind of the whole idea of how we construct families and how we come to experience family life. For example, here's 3 scenes from the film. In one, Grandma goes to the shrine of her ex-husband, which is in the house of the son of her ex-husband, with his new wife, or his second wife. At first it looks like she's doing that for a genuine emotional reason, and in some sense she might be. She certainly sits and prays at the shrine for a while. But she also basically is extorting money off them through guilt, really, as like pretending to be more frail than she actually is. In another scene, Aki is seen at the strip bar or dancing joint. I don't know quite what the cultural word for this is in Japan. It's not quite like either of those things, but it's quite similar. She's working there under her stage name of Sequoia, and she is basically dealing with a client who she regularly sees. They then go and spend some time in the chatting room where they just hang out with each other, and he just, without saying any words in the whole sequence, puts his head on her lap and listens to her talk about her family. And then finally we get to see Nobuyu and Osamu hanging out as a married couple on their own when no one else is there, which obviously is quite rare in this tiny room with this big family. And it leads to them having sex. It's not this big overblown movie sex, it's this natural, sweet thing. Now, in those 3 scenes, which at first glance don't really seem to have that much interconnection and certainly don't have any ties to the main plot per se of the film, What Kore-eda is doing is giving us a collage almost of emotions, of ways that people deal with tenderness, intimacy, and family connections. That recurs throughout the film, and it allows the movie to be both incredibly understated and naturalistic, and also intensely emotional and involving for the audience to watch. Without wanting to spoil the film, Kore-eda doesn't pull any punches, and so the film is really emotional. But what's impressive about it, even more so than that, in the light of what goes on in it, is that Kore-eda just isn't interested in judging these characters. And he offers a really even-handed appraisal of what their life is like, more than a kind of moralistic look at how they should act or what they should have done. It's that fairness and even-handedness that the film has with its subject matter, joined with its laser-tight focus on the emotional inner lives of these really well-rendered, rich characters, that make Shoplifters an absolute delight to watch. I could wax lyrical about this film all day. I could tell you about its beautiful, thoughtful cinematography. I could tell you about its slow, deliberate pacing. I could tell you about its well-rounded, charismatic, warm, and often quite funny performances. But in the end, all I'm going to say is, go and see Shoplifters, preferably in a cinema. Just one last thing to say, I saw this film at a preview screening organised by Beats, which is an organisation that promotes theatre and screen activities, including East Asian people. I highly recommend you have a look at their website if that's something you're interested in. They had a couple of technical problems at the screening, but overall it was a really good experience, and I hope that they continue doing stuff like this. If you've seen Shoplifters, I'd love to have a chat with you in the comments down below about what you thought about it. I think it's a really thought-provoking film, and I'd like to have that discussion with anyone who's seen it. And that's it from me. Have a good one. Bye for now.